Hello, and welcome to the Zero2hired Podcast, the show that helps struggling job seekers find a career that's right for you. In every episode, we have one mission: to provide you with unique tips and strategies from leading industry experts that will get you in front of hiring managers. Enjoy the show.
Everybody, welcome to another episode of the Zero2hired Podcast. My name is John Ribeiro, and our special guest on this episode is Farrukh Abbas. Farrukh is a designated chartered professional accountant and is also a certified general accountant. He distinctively holds an engineering degree from the US, as well as a Master of Business Administration and a Master of Aeronautical Science degree from one of the world's leading Aerospace University. He holds a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and has been instrumental in various process improvement initiatives at organizations that he served. He has a wide variety of professional experience in industries such as aerospace, healthcare, CPG, hospitality, research, consulting, and not-for-profit management. Please help me welcome Farrukh. Hey, Farrukh.
Hi, John. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
Yes, we're very excited about having you on the podcast. I know you and we met back at a LinkedIn local event, and you were telling me about some of the work that you were doing in the nonprofit space around mentoring and helping new Canadians come into the workforce in Canada. And I thought you would be the perfect guest for the type of audience and content that we speak to. So welcome.
Thank you.
So we're going to get into this, and I want to make sure, I know when we spoke for the first time, you gave me some really valuable information in terms of things that could help newcomers. And I know you mentored quite a few newcomers that come into Canada for the first time. So before we get into that, what made you get into this type of work?
So basically, when I was working for Deloitte Consulting, they had partnership with TRIAC. That's an organization that offers the mentorship to the new immigrants, and it link up professionals in Canadian job market with new immigrants. So that really, I started working on that for 3 to 4 years back. And that's how I got involved, and I really enjoyed assisting the new immigrants in their job search and providing them guidance in terms of their resume and in job interview preparation. So it always gave me a great pleasure to assist someone, and when someone gets a job in their field, and when they call me back and they say, "Hey, Farrukh, thank you for your efforts, and I've got a job," it just is a great satisfaction. There's nothing that can compare to that.
I am with you 100%, and I know the feeling of giving and just helping others. You yourself, you were mentioning that you actually made the transition from the U.S. and Canada, which is part of the reason why you got into this area in the first place.
That is correct, right? In U.S., I was working as an aeronautical engineer for a helicopter manufacturer, and most of my experience was in helicopter quality assurance. Specifically designing also for the police as well as the electronic news gathering helicopters. But when I moved to Canada, I realized that the market here was not as wide, and there are no manufacturers for helicopters, and especially for police helicopters as well as electronic news gathering. Luckily, I had an MBA in the background, so I realized that the market in engineering was not as good, but the market for management as well as finance was good. And then I started my career, my schooling in CPA, and then slowly I ended up completing those courses while I was working. It took me 6 to 7 years, but eventually I got my chartered 3 years back, and during that time, while I was going to school, it also gives you a great respect in the work environment, that they realize that you are going through that process, you're working hard, and it has always been a great experience for me in terms of getting the jobs.
That's fantastic. And I know, and like you said, a lot of institutions and organizations here in Canada are very supportive of people that go through the educational program while they're still working. So as you know, I know you mentioned in one of your roles, I think it was Deloitte specifically, in terms of your mentoring, you got involved as a way of giving back. So when you started mentoring and coaching, I guess, mentoring individuals, what were some of the biggest challenges that you saw that new Canadians faced when they were looking for work in the Canadian workplace?
Within Canadian workspace as well, and especially in Toronto, because most of the immigrant influx is in Toronto. Toronto is a huge market for immigrants as well as for jobs. So I have seen on both ways, not only as a job seeker, but also when I was at Deloitte and I was looking to hire folks. I was always amazed that we always had openings in the job market at work. And at the same time, when I go out and meet with folks, they always said they couldn't find any work. So when I got more into that and I realized that there was a wide gap between the understanding of the immigrant in terms of their understanding of the workspace in Canada as such.
Mhm.
For example, when they apply for the job, I have seen that they use one generic resume and apply to various jobs in one company. So that pretty much is hurting them. At the same time, um, I usually think that I'm strong on that belief is that if folks come in here and take some courses in English, because we have good grammar coming in from immigrants, but the accent was always on the weak side. So if folks start taking some courses in English while they're improving their presence and presentational skills, that helps a lot. And the third most important point is I had realized was that at the interviews, usually now and even before, when I asked the candidates that, do you have any questions for me? Because of the culture back home, you don't ask questions, you pretty much reply back. But I had seen that gap here was that I want them to ask me questions and challenge me, and they would not ask me any questions. So that was a shift for me that I always ask my mentees to look for that, and then they look out for markets in jobs, search for the company, ensure to tailor make their resumes, and then apply for one job at a time.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and it's actually one of the things that we also teach we teach our clients is to customize a resume. And I know it's challenging, especially when you're so desperate for work. You just want to get your resume out to as many people as possible. But without customizing, you're not actually speaking to the job description. And this is why we believe it's so important to really take your time and apply to each job individually by highlighting certain things that are specific to that role. So, as you were coaching people through taking their resume from generic to something more specific, what would be one or two key points that you would have people highlight in their resume to make it look like it's more customized?
Usually, when I have seen the resumes, they miss the factor of their achievements when they work for certain employers. Um, if you want to be a 9 to 5 employer, anybody can do any job. But if you really want to stand out
Mm-hmm.
amongst the crowd who are applying, ensure to write down your achievements on the resume after each job. What the work you have done is good, great, but also what kind of achievements you have done in terms of reducing the workload for other employees or making any process improvements. Those sort of points always make you stand out and speak more about those points in your interviews. Create stories that how did you improve certain processes, how did you reduce everybody's looking for bottom line increases, so how did you work to reduce some hours at work that work used to take, for example, 12 hours, now you have reduced it down to 5 or 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So you highlight those points, that always stands out amongst the crowd.
No, absolutely. And actually bringing those data points, and actually, I think you touched on it, you know, telling the story. How do you take and you unfold the story that shows how you were able to improve something? So this is great. So this is great information. Um, in terms of your story, and when you're coaching your mentees on how to structure a story, what would be one or two tips that you would give them so they could structure a story that delivers a stronger message?
So, during our work experiences, we have all observed that there are problems. I mean, there are problems when you look at any of the processes, any day to day activities you're doing, there are problems. And if you had found a solution to it and you have really wholeheartedly tried to work to solve that problem, in short, to write it down. And I always ask not only my mentees, but also my friends, that on day-to-day basis, you have your master resume that should have any work you're doing day to day or any improvements you have done on the processes. Keep adding those points. So your master resume can end up being 4, 5, 6 pages. And when you're applying for a job, pick up the points from that master resume and try to see which of those points are matching with the job descriptions you're applying, and bring those points to that resume which you're going to apply with. So that always helps, because we tend to forget the kind of work we have done for organizations. And it's always a great idea to make sure that you keep writing it in your master resume. Even now, I have a master resume, it's about 7, 8 pages long, and I keep making sure that on monthly or twice a month, I write 1 or 2 points of anything significant I have done this month at the work. And that really helped me. For example, 5 to 6 years down the road, if I'm looking to apply for a job, it'll be easy for me to find out any of the relevant information from that master, and I can transfer that information into the resume I'm going to apply with.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I would have never thought of taking and adding points as you're going through your job today. So whether you're in Canada or you're outside of Canada, having that master resume and adding in those individual points and then filtering it afterwards and man, that's so wise. Wow. It's a great, no, but I mean, it's great because it's simple, because we all go through those experiences where we forget. And I think we're all, everybody kind of goes through this. We forget what we've done and we forget what we've accomplished. By taking one or two little bullet points and throwing it into your resume makes it so much easier afterwards to take out what you don't need and leave in what's relevant and important. So that's definitely a great way of capturing and maintaining a record and a history of all the information that's required for maybe the upcoming job that you're applying for. So that's fantastic.
Great, yeah. And the other point I always mention is that when you're applying for a job, and when you're attaching your resumes online job, make sure to write down your name and the job you're applying for. So for example, I write down Farrukh Abbas _ financial analyst. And in that way, when you're applying it to that, and I also would add the name of the company. So usually candidates are applying 5, 6, 7 jobs at a time, and hopefully they are applying with tailor-made resume to each job or each company. When they receive a call, it will be easy for them to pick up what resume they sent out. And the employer would also think that they have spent time to create that resume, and they have given them a name of not only the position, but also for the company. So it looks good both ways, and it will be a good filing practice even for candidates.
Yeah, great tip. I really like how you're keeping a record. And I think a lot of candidates, as they're going, we call it the machine gun approach, as they're just firing resumes out to different companies. I've seen it, and I've seen where, you call up a candidate and you start talking to them about the job, and they're like, oh, well, which job is this? Because they've applied to so many different jobs. So it's a great tip in terms of keeping and managing the jobs that you're applying for, to make sure that you're actually speaking to the right job when the right person speaks, or when the right person calls you, so you know that you're aligned with what the person's going to ask you. So this is great. So we're going to keep going on this. So we're just going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Are you planning to move to Canada and concerned about how you will find your first job? Maybe you're already here and struggling to get that big break. As a newcomer to Canada myself, I knew the best time to be prepared for a job search is before I needed the job. My name is Connell Valentine, and I'll be your online course instructor helping you get the job soon after and maybe even before you land in Canada. I'll be sharing my screen while helping you build your brand new Canadian resume that will delight recruiters. We will create a direct email marketing campaign to hiring managers that will make you stand out from your competition. We will then be doing a demo of a real online job application, showing you the precise steps you need to follow to quadruple your chances at getting the job interview. And finally, to get the inside info on the vast majority of the hidden job market, I'll show you how real networking is done in Canada. The average salary in Canada is well over $200 per day. Don't waste any more time and money being unemployed while trying to find the right way to job search. Get lifetime access to these courses at the link in the show notes below at courses.zero2hired.com. Use it to get your first job fast and to get your promotional jobs in your future.
Okay, welcome back to the second half of the Zero to Hired podcast. And our special guest this week is Farrukh Abbas. Farrukh, when we left off, you were talking about taking the resume, the application that you were using for the job and keeping record to make sure that, when an employer calls you, a recruiter or a hiring manager, that you have a record of the job that you're applying for, and it makes it look like your job application is customized. So you gave us a great tip there. What I wanted to ask you about was outside of doing the master resume, are there any other tips that you give your mentees in terms of preparation for the interview and some of the things that they should be looking out specifically for when they're about to go into an interview and they're going through that entire process?
Sure. I mean, that is the most important aspect of locating a job and scoring a job pretty much. So I usually, even now with experience, I like to spend 4 to 8 hours for one job interview. And in that, what I do is that again, before the job interview, I will have bullet points from the job description and I'll match it with my own resume bullet points and also with the achievements. And with the achievement, I have a story that I already have covered. So I will try to put these three things in perspective and for each bullet point on the job description, on my resume, and with my achievement, I'll be able to speak easily at the interview process. So I ask my mentees to ensure that they also write the stories that the kind of work they have done, the process improvements and things like that in the past, and ensure to have a whole a storyline behind it. And in that storyline, they can cover so many questions which the interviewer going to ask. For example, strengths or weaknesses or any problem you have solved when you're in the meeting. And any of those, when any of those questions come up, you can always refer back to that particular story. So for each interview, you will have 2 or 3 stories that will be enough for you to cover the entire interview. And the other point I always mention is to research about the company. Ensure that you have read the vision and mission statement of the companies. You have to understand the culture of the company. If they track a record of their carbon footprints, what kind of revenues or sales they have in the past, because I'm from the finance background, so of course I'm going to talk about finance related subjects also. And if there is any news about the company that had recently emerged on the newspaper or on the media, ensure to write those questions relating to that research. And you would end up having 8 to 10 questions with you and type them up and take it with you in the interview. Typed up 8 to 10 interviews and try to make an interactive interview. Just don't give the answers of the question interviewer asks you, but during the interview, also ask questions. So when you'll be amazed that when you'll have that process of interactive interview going on. For example, I'll give my own example. If I go to an interview, if interviewer has set aside a time for 1 hour for me, I will ensure that out of that 1 hour, I ask questions for at least 20-25 minutes. And that shows that you have prepared and you are really into the job and you're really into the company you're applying for, and you have an interest about the company, and you have read what kind of products they are coming out with, what kind of marketing campaigns they have run. So you can sort of play around with different gambit of the company and discuss in your interview. So it will leave a great impression on the interviewer. And at the end of the interview, when the interviewer asks the candidate that, do you have any question, ensure to show that paper to him that, hey, yes, I have wrote down 8 to 10 questions. This is the research I have done. I usually print out any news clips I have or anything else about the company, and I show it to them that, yes, I have done this research and these are the questions I have. And I have asked few of the questions already during the process of the interview, but in the end, I will ask you a couple of more questions. I understand that we have time constraints, so that's why I'm not going to ask you 5 or 6 questions, but at the last, ask at least 2 well thought out questions. And before you leave, ask for their email address where you can send them thank you email after the work, after the interview, and also thank them and ask them what is the next step in this hiring process is. So when you go in the interview, I have seen most of the folks, they are extremely stressed out. But if you're preparing 4 to 8 hours for the interview, you have covered all areas which they're going to ask you. And if you're so well prepared, you will enjoy the interview process. You would not be stressed out, but you rather enjoy the discussion. And instead of 1 hour, you'll end up spending 1 hour, 15 minutes. And my own meter is that if you have spent anything above 1 hour, the chances are really good for you to get the interview. Do not come out of it in like 40 minutes or 50 minutes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you touched on some really great points. The 4 to 8 hours is definitely, you have to treat job search like a job almost, because it does take time. And I find that it depends on the role that you're applying for, but a lot of people want to do it quickly.
Yes.
And the way I explain it to them is, you think about it, the time and effort that you put in is going to equate to the type of income you're going to be receiving. So the more work and time and effort you put in to a higher level role, the more prepared you'll be, the higher the chances of you asking for a higher income based on the same role. It definitely improves your chances, because now you're doing the work, and it pays off, because instead of making 45 or 50 or 60 or even depending on whatever the number is, you can increase your percentage of pay by 10 to 20% more if you go in better prepared with the right information. This way, when you're asking and you get to the piece of the interview where you're not the actual interview, but the job offer, the negotiation piece, it gives you a little bit more leverage. It's definitely important. Yes. And it's interesting that you say 8 to 10 questions. I know you've done this as well. You must have interviewed hundreds of people.
Right.
And we're lucky if we get maybe 1 or 2 questions.
That's correct.
We're not really being engaged. You touch on a very important topic of engagement with the person on the other side of the table. It definitely should be a conversation. And if you're doing that for 20 minutes of your interview, wow. Yeah. I don't know how many interviews you've done where people usually don't go more than 5 minutes in terms of their questions.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think I had, for example, I had a friend of mine. He applied for a job, for a controller level job, financial controller level job, and we were chatting right before his interview. And I asked him the same research. So he did some research, and we saw a slight surge in the company's sales 2 years back, and it was flat from there. So I told him to write down the question that whether that company had acquired another company, or what happened in, for example, 2014, that all of a sudden your sales went up and it's steady at that point. So either you have acquired a company, or either you had a great marketing campaign going, or either you had a great sales leader. So what happened that you had a great number in 1 year and it's just a steady number after that? And when he wrote down those 3 questions and asked the VP during the interview process, the VP was amazed that, yes, I mean, they had acquired a company and because of the revenue of that company and the sales revenue of that company. They had a spike and they have not been able to increase the sales, and they're going to hire a VP of sales from there to increase the sales. So it just shows that you're well prepared and you are there to offer the recommendations to the senior leadership also.
Yeah, I know it definitely takes you to a different level because now your engagement is there, because now you've shown that you've done the research, you've gone into the background of the organization, and you're genuinely interested. Like you typically can't be genuinely interested in an organization if you don't go into the details. And I think you clearly helped that individual, and I'm pretty sure you got the job. Can I say that with confidence?
Yeah.
It definitely gives you an edge because there's, and what I try to tell candidates and clients is, for every job posting, you can get up to 300 people applying for the same role.
Exactly.
So it's a pretty tough job market. It's not impossible to get work if you do it right. You take the right steps. And Farrukh, you've covered quite a few of all the right steps to take. You're definitely going to give yourself an advantage in the job market. And especially for new Canadians, right? Because you're competing against the people that are here. And then, there's also the market of new Canadians that are also entering the Canadian workforce. So you're competing against everybody. So the better armed you go into the interview process, the better off you're going to be. So in terms of follow-up, so you talked about email. And I'm wondering, is email the only way you can connect with somebody after the interview?
I personally ask for first sending out an email, just a thank you email. And one more point I would like to introduce is that when you're preparing for your job interview, search who this hiring manager is and who the interviewer is. Mm-hmm. Read about their LinkedIn profile. I mean, what kind of backgrounds they have and what kind of volunteer work they do. Because usually folks who are doing the volunteer kind of work or any other activities, they have that kind of information on their LinkedIn page detailed. So try to build some sort of connection that way. And when you're in the interview, on the softer side of the interview, ask about their volunteer work they do, because that will create some kind of rapport from there. And after the interview, when you come back, when you offer them a thank you email, follow up after 2 weeks. Don't keep sending the emails because the hiring process takes a long time. Sometimes the budgets have been approved for the position, but all of a sudden the company's third quarter results are not good and they're saying, hey, just hold on to hiring people for one more month. So there are a lot of corporate decisions that take place. So if you keep sending the hiring manager that email, hey, what happened, it will not look good. So follow up after 2 weeks with the HR person who had initially contacted you and ask what's going on, but don't keep sending the emails and bombarding them with the questions.
So great tip. I like that. I find sometimes it's either one of two things. Either nobody sends anything or they send too much. So the one message and then a follow-up 2 weeks after is a great tip. I just to get into the details just a little bit, Farrukh, is there anything that you would specify in that follow-up email? Just so for our audience members, if they're wondering, what should I include? What kind of messaging should I put in there? What would you recommend to put it into a follow-up email?
Sure. Just don't pick up and paste a follow-up email from Google. Try to make it customized. Discuss about the points you had already discussed in the interview, and something that you had missed, and there was an achievement and you forgot to mention that. Also, write about it and try to link yourself with that job and try to emphasize that how valuable you can be for the company based on your experiences and based on the discussions. So again, it should be a customized thank you email incorporating everything you have discussed and what you can bring to the table. And I have seen folks even I receive thank you email to their cut and paste from Google.
Yeah. Though somebody I know says, don't use the default. Don't be a default. Customize your messaging. So yeah, including parts of the conversation is key to having a successful follow-up. Definitely a great tip. So Farrukh, we're coming to the end, to near the end of our podcast. If people wanted to get a hold of you, because I know one of the things that you said is you're open to sharing information and having people connect with you. What would be the best way for people to do that?
I think connecting to the LinkedIn profile. I think John, you'll be sharing my LinkedIn profile link.
Yep.
So that would be the great idea. On that link on my LinkedIn profile, there's an email address. Send me an email if you're in town, or if you're in Canada, you have recently immigrated. Send me an email or send me a message. But I usually receive anywhere from 4 to 5 invitations a day. And sometimes I also get messages from folks who ask me that if we are hiring in our company, and I'll say, yes, we are, and I'll send them the link for their job posting. And then they say, great, I will apply, but would your company be offering me a visa to come to Canada to interview for the process? So don't ask me for those kind of questions, but I'll be more than happy if you're already in town, you are a new immigrant to Canada, even if you're an older immigrant, if you have any question, because this is my passion. I have a full-time job, but this is my passion. And I would also like to take this opportunity because I work for a not-for-profit organization for Canadian Blood Services. So when you are in Canada, and you will understand that there's a great land of opportunity, there's some sort of obligation on the citizens of Canada and one of those obligations that we have to donate blood. So take part in that because all I ask for is that, if you donate blood, somebody else can use it. So I would think that your podcast, John, would be able to link the new immigrants, and they can understand that how giving Canadians are, and I would like to use this platform to address this message.
No, definitely. I'll make sure I include a link to Canadian Blood Services. Yeah, no, it's an important platform. And thank you for mentioning that. So I'll make sure I also include a link. So for those that are located locally in Canada, and if you want to donate blood, you can find a local center nearby and you can donate. And I think they have a regular schedule of when they go out and they host events. But the website has all that information that they can access and go out and donate at that point. So thank you, Farrukh, for being on the Zero to Hire podcast. It's been a pleasure having you. You've given us some really, really good information. I'm going to make sure that I capture some of the key points. I'll put it into our podcast description along with some of the links that you mentioned throughout the podcast. So thank you again for being part of our podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for inviting me. And I'm always available to assist anyone who can I assist with.
Terrific. Thank you for listening into the Zero to Hired podcast. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Zero to Hired podcast. Make sure you check out our website, www.zero2hired.com, and download your free resume template that's proven to get results, complete with examples and guidelines. Make sure you tune in as we interview leading industry experts who provide tips and strategies to help you get the career that's right for you.